You are the most self-critical person about yourself.
There are lots of ways that you can monetize without having millions of views.
It's all well and good being passionate about something, but it should also pay.
We deliberately don't take sponsorship.
Hey, so welcome back to Podfathers. I'm back with Tolu, and I can't wait for this episode, Tolu.
This is the money episode.
It's
literally
the money episode, the monetization episode. This is what hopefully people are going to be watching and going, the potential of podcasting, of making money, making extra money for your business is just enormous, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're talking about business podcasts, and that's always really important to remember. And the core of business is really making money. So
yeah, so if you're not interested in this podcast, you're not really interested in running a business, I don't think. And I think this is a crucial topic as well, because I think it's all well and good being passionate about something, but it should also pay.
Yeah.
There should be a reward at the end, rather than going, I'm passionate, I'm keep creating content. Okay, but what's coming back to you? Because you need to keep sustaining that passion.
Yeah.
And making money is a great way of sustaining that passion as well.
And let's be honest, if you're not intentional about building your podcast in a way that it can be monetized, it's very easy for it to not to be. You could be 150 episodes in and not monetizing it because you've not been intentional at the beginning about thinking about what that could look like.
And that's just so key, is actually mapping that journey.
Yes.
And we're not saying after episode 1 you're going to make thousands of pounds. That's not what we're trying to sell you. But you have to have a route and an approach where the end goal is the content you're putting out is somehow generating money back to your business. And we're not talking about personal brands. And if you want to do a personal podcast, that's fantastic. But I think all of this advice is geared towards companies wanting to utilize podcasts as content and how that content then resonates into money. So let's get into it. Monetization, what is it?
I think that's what we really just talked about, is how do you make money from your podcast? So I think this episode is going to be really good for people to understand the different options and the different ways of approaching it. But really it's about how do we turn our podcast into money for our business?
Yeah, and I think some of these answers aren't going to be as obvious as people think, because when you say monetization of podcasts, straight away people think, yep, and they think YouTube as well. Like, I get 1,000 views, I get 35p or whatever the payout rate is. You don't get paid a lot on that monetization. We're talking about making money for your business.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of the examples, and let's talk about some of the routes of monetization. So we've mentioned YouTube. I'm going to be honest, I'm going to say that's my least important. I'm not going to focus too much on that.
I have that as one of my last ones.
Yeah, well. I'm surprised it's even on my list. It's made it on there for some reason, because I think people automatically, when you say monetization, it's YouTube. If you're running a company, I don't think you're aiming to get 10 million views where every episode you're churning out £20,000 from YouTube. I don't think. I think you're getting into it to create content. And how would you use that content to then make money? What are some of the things on your list? I'm sure some of this is going to match as well, yours.
Yeah, because I think it's true, like, most people are not going to be Stephen Bartlett. They're not going to be like Chris Wilcott. Like, they're just not going to be those big people that get millions of views. But I think that there are lots of ways that you can monetize without having millions of views. So one of the things that I've been thinking about, probably my main one, is really relationships. So the relationships that you build, and we talk about this in some of the other episodes as well, but the relationships that you build get you closer to that money much faster. So let's say there are some companies you want to work with, or some people that you want to work with. Having them on your podcast, or having a podcast, helps you to get to that money faster, because it builds that relationship. It gives people the opportunity to get to know you as a business, get to know what's important to you, how you do business, and also the fact that you're putting yourself out there. That those relationships that are built through that can really easily and quickly lead to money.
The episode we've got on Podfathers for guests literally answers everything you've just said. I think if you want to delve more into that, watch that episode, because it delves into the intricacies of relationships and how you can utilize that to make money as well and get people onto your podcast. You mentioned sponsorships as well. Elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think that as your audience grows, and when I say grows, I don't mean you have to have thousands of listeners. Even if you have 300, 200 listeners, companies might want to sponsor you to be part of what you're doing. And I know those numbers might not seem really big, but if you think about it from a company perspective, if they can get in front of 200 people that are really in their niche, then that's worth it to them. Because if they're going to pay to just find those 200 people on TV, you've got to go to millions of people to actually find that. But when you've got a really well-curated niche of people, that becomes really, really valuable.
And you've got an engaged audience who are following you for that industry insight.
Exactly.
As an example, let's say you've got a plumbing podcast, so you give hints and tips, you're with your co-host. You might only have 500 people watching every single episode, which isn't a huge number. But the likes of, let's say, Worcester Bosch might want to sponsor you because Worcester Bosch are sponsoring this plumbing company with 500 people being watching every episode who are engaged audiences. So suddenly they've got their brand in front of their ideal audience.
Exactly.
So when you need a new boiler, again, they've got the branding in there. And they may not pay you thousands of pounds, but if they pay you a few £100s for every episode, you've covered your fees, you've covered your time. And also importantly, what we tell the people that we help manage is to reinvest that and to keep growing your podcast.
Yeah.
You're not going to start taking salary off of that. But, once you've got money coming in, reinvest and start running ads against your reels, against your episodes. Because, again, you're growing your numbers. So when they come to renew their contract, Worcester Bosch, they might pay you twice the amount next time. Because I know you've got twice the audience.
Because I think if you do that reinvesting, that grows your audience so much faster and with the right type of people. Because some people start to get more general. And then that's how they grow their audiences. But if you can find those exact people that you're looking for and grow a really targeted audience, that's really, really valuable to companies. Yeah.
And again, I think people underestimate what you've just mentioned about that company would have to go on TV, pay thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
I'm talking 10, 20, 30,000, tens of thousands of pounds to reach that same engaged audience because they have to pull 1 million people to get those 500 people who are engaged in plumbing advice, for example. Actually, they'd rather just pay you a few £100s and go straight to that demographic. And these sponsors, they have money. They have to spend their money on marketing because they have shareholders as well to account to. And a certain proportion of their money has to go towards sponsorship and branding and marketing.
And I used to work in advertising, right? So I worked at Sky, I worked in what's called advanced advertising. So we'd found ways to, for example, overlay company data or customer data with what we have for Sky customers. And the smaller the audience was, the more expensive actually the cost per thousand was.
Because you're being more targeted.
Because you're being more targeted. And I think that's the kind of mindset we need to approach this with. So even if I'm going to Worcester Bosch and say, hey, I've got 500 really highly targeted people. And then you start to think about things like, okay, if I can get 2 sales from those 500 people, that's going to be thousands of pounds for Worcester Bosch. So I can actually charge a bit of a premium for that. So these are some of the ways that we have to think about it a little bit differently and not just think, well, I've only got 500 people, but the value of that 500 people could be really, really high to someone like a Worcester Bosch or whoever it is.
Yeah, and that's why your focus should be on providing as much value to that niche as possible.
Exactly.
So they keep coming back. So every episode has got 500 people. You have 500 subscribers who watch 35 minutes of a 40-minute show, which is incredible if they can do that as an average. Because then you can present that data to Worcester Bosch and it's common sense and logic for them to go, yeah, we'll pay you a few £100s to sponsor your show.
I think we've said Worcester Bosch a few too many times. They should sponsor our show.
If you're listening, Worcester Bosch. But it's also given a real life case study for people to listen in and go, oh yeah, I'll see how you've made that connection. So don't be afraid of, a lot of this also comes down to imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I've only got 500 subscribers. Okay, well, if you have a great show and those 500 people are watching every single episode, you have an amazing audience that you can start going to sponsors. And in fact, you could start going out to guests and charging them. That's one of my next points.
Talk to me a bit more about that.
So within our studio, again, when we manage podcasts, we always have a route to monetization. We always start consultation with that when they want to start a podcast is how do you want to monetize? And one of the key things I always get people to think about is charging guests to come on your show. You're not going to do that in episode 1. You probably won't do it until episode 12. But if you can build a highly engaged audience, you can then invite relevant people with businesses onto your podcast. You're giving them exposure and a platform to talk about their business to your engaged audience. So why should you not charge them to do that? Because again, if you've got 1,000 people watching each episode, and I've got, not Worcester Bosch, another representative from, I can't think off the top of my head, Sony, come in, talk, but they're presenting to 1,000 people who are going to be watching that show about the latest product they've got released. They're happy to pay for that because they're tapping into your audience who are watching you. They're getting exposure. So why would they not want to do that? And that's not to say every single guest you approach will go, yeah, of course, there's my credit card, I'll pay for it. But again, if you're approaching 100 people, chances are 5 or 6 will say, yeah, I'll happily go in front of your audience and talk about my business. Because if you generate one sale off the back of that, plus you've created for them tons of content that they can go away with a full episode, they can go away with reels, that would have cost them a few £100s to do anyway. So I think
that's really good.
The problem again is imposter syndrome. A lot of these podcasters, hosts, businesses are thinking, well, I don't feel comfortable charging people. We should, because you're helping them make money. You're helping them give them exposure. So you should be charging them, even to at least cover your studio costs in the first place.
And we've talked a little bit about the benefits of sponsorship and even guest paying. What are some of the drawbacks, which, as weird as it sounds like, there are drawbacks sometimes to monetization.
Who doesn't like making money?
But what would be some of the drawbacks?
To monetization? There aren't many. I think I had this conversation a few weeks ago with another client who brought something up. There was a bank that wanted to sponsor his show. And so the issue is, because he's talking about the finance industry and the banking industry, he's going to be tied, and there's going to be a conflict of interest, because if he's being paid by a bank to sponsor the show, he can't then give a balanced view to his audience about the banking industry. And some of it, he said, is shocking, it's terrible, but I can't. He said, it doesn't feel right, I'm taking that money but doing this, because then they'll just pull their funding. There is a drawback to that, and you do have to be careful, because depending on who your sponsor is, you are going to be tied, and it is going to look fairly biased to your audiences. So yeah, I only came up across that a few weeks ago when he mentioned it. So that would be my only one that I can come up with.
That's something that I hear on some of the podcasts I listen to. Some of them are like, look, we deliberately don't take sponsorship because we want to be able to say whatever we like, whenever we like, and we want to be free. So I think that is a really, really good point. It can sometimes limit you in terms of what you can and can't say. And that's definitely like something to consider, because some people might see that as, I can't be authentic. And authenticity is actually really, really important when you're doing things like this.
Yeah, and your audience can see straight through it. Worcester Bosch are amazing. Yeah, and as soon as they can see through that then becomes an issue, because once you lose authenticity, it's probably a direct correlation to the amount of followers you have as well, because you will start losing followers.
Yeah, because the trust isn't there.
I'm not sure there's a huge amount of trust on internet reviews and testimonials nowadays anyway, because any celebrity can endorse absolutely anything. But yeah, as a podcast host, as a business, you have to be careful of who you're taking sponsorship from, and is that going to take away from your core message? And is that going to shut you up, essentially, of not being able to say things that you'd want to say?
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. Do you know, some of the podcasts that I listen to, that I listen through all the adverts, is because often when the adverts come, I skip really, really quick. But there are some that I always listen to the ads, and it's the ones where I can feel that they're aligned with that product, right? Yeah. So for example, like, I was a basketball player, I wore pretty much strictly Nikes. So me being sponsored, that's congruent with who I am, right?
Yeah,
like,
if McDonald's sponsored you, doesn't quite fit, does it?
Doesn't quite fit, you know?
He's gone for the money, he's sold out.
It's quite clear. Yes. And that's where I think that if you can align sponsorships with things that you actually use, like, are important to your brand, I think that's how you can avoid some of those cons of it feeling a bit inauthentic, because actually I use that product. You know? Yeah,
and I mean, going back to the case study example I said before with a plumbing company in Worcester Bosch, you still will be careful with that, because then do you not say anything bad about Worcester Bosch because they're sponsoring the show? Or do you have a clause in your contract to say, we can say whatever you want? If you bring out a boiler that we don't like, we're going to slay it. Yeah. And I think if your audience can understand that, they will appreciate that. You know, you're taking money to help your podcast grow, but at the same time, you are still not going to be judged by going every single episode. But yeah, if your boiler runs, if it dies, you have to go to this brand. No, maybe there's other brands that you should be going to. So I think as long as you can still get that across, and you have a contract in place to say you can sponsor us, but we will still say whatever we want. And if you bring out a crap product, we're going to tell our audience it's crap. So you just better make good products. So
which actually everyone wins from.
Exactly. And I think that way you don't lose that authenticity as much, and you still have that trust with your audiences. So yeah, sponsorship is an amazing idea. Charging your guests is an amazing idea, and it is also win-win.
Yeah.
Even if you charge your guest £400 to come on your show, are they going to create that much content? Are they going to create their own show in a studio, for example, for less than £400 by bringing on their own host, by cutting their own reels, by doing the advertising to help promote that episode? Probably not. You've already got those systems in place. You've already got the studio hire. You've already got your podcast, you've already got your audience. All that guest is doing is turning up and showcasing their passion in their business, walking away, but walking away with a ton of assets as well for the sake of a few £100.
Really good way to think about it.
So yeah, just lose that imposter syndrome. If you've done the work and you've got a great podcast you're happy with, you have an engaged audience, charge your guests. And that doesn't always, you know, if they're a celebrity status, they've got a huge following, clearly you'd look at circumstances and go, we're not going to charge you, we need you on board. But otherwise, you're giving advertising away for free.
I think that balance is really important, and understanding almost like that power dynamic of where the power lies.
The leverage. Who's got the leverage?
Yeah.
We've got the audience. You want to showcase a new product to my audience? I'm going to charge you for that. I'm going to charge you fairly because I want you on the show, because I want to provide that value to my audiences. But you can't have that for free. But at the same time, if you've got 1 million followers and I've got 300 followers of YouTube, come on for free. I'll
might even pay you.
I might do the catering as well. But so those are, well, we're talking about direct, aren't we? We're talking about the tangible. Straight away, you get paid for it.
Yeah.
But clearly, there's also what I call intangible, you call indirect in terms of monetization. So let's talk about that.
So one of the things that I've been thinking about is the more you do things like podcasts, the more you grow in podcasts, the more your authority grows. So you become seen as a thought leader or as a bit of an authority within your industry. And that also comes with things like paid speaking gigs and panels and different things like that. And the more of those you do, the more your business also grows, because people see you up on that stage. They want to then check you out. They see what your business does, and maybe that's what they're looking for. So the more that you can grow your presence and the more you can grow your authority, the more opportunities that come from that.
And you've built that trust, because if you've got a speaking engagement, chances are they've vetted you already.
Yeah.
They like what you have to say, so they've invited you on board to talk to a whole room full of people.
Yeah.
So you've got that instant credibility, instant trust, and then from that you get instant traffic to your website to find out more about what you do. Oh great, you sell something I want. I trust you because I've seen you on stage. You must be good. I've done my due diligence. Let's buy from you. Or let's connect, let's build a relationship, let's network.
Yeah.
And you just open a relationship.
For people to buy from you.
It does. And you are putting a face to your brand. And that's, in marketing, we've talked about this for like 6-7 years now. You can't be a faceless brand anymore.
Yeah.
You can't hide behind your website. You need to have the people behind in your team front and center. And that's not just being on your About Us page with a little headshot. It's being on the podcast. It's being on your social media. And what better way than doing it with a voice in the industry and actually being seen as an industry expert, because you're at all these shows, you're at all these exhibitions. You're giving talks. And the same thing with podcasts. Again, you're an industry voice and people build trust off of that, and they buy into your personality as well.
What are some of the other ways that you can think of, the indirect ways?
The indirect ways. I think just the ways in which you can use podcast content is almost limitless. You know, we keep saying it pretty much every episode. You've done a 1-hour episode. Off the back of that, you can do your blog post. Off that, you're going to also build relationships, and you're going to have a new route of traffic coming to your website because you're already on the search engines for that certain thing. You've put it in your newsletter, for example. You send that newsletter out, and suddenly you get another 2-3 people inquiring because you've built trust through that episode. And again, just I think for me, the main thing is that personal branding. We've been huge on that for a long time. Is building your personal brand is so important for people to have trust in you, and that is part of their due diligence. So.
And I think one of the ways that we can also think about the content side of things is everybody does cold outreach, right? Everybody sends those emails. And imagine if you can give someone value from a podcast episode as part of your cold outreach. So instead of just asking for things from them, you can actually say, hey, check this out. This might be really useful for you as someone who's doing X, Y, Z. And that's where you can use that content as a value add as well. And that starts to get people intrigued, starts to get people down the funnel. And you can also use it as a bit of a lead magnet. So you can say, you know, I've got this episode. If you want me to send it to you, then reply whatever interested and I'll send you the episode. There's so many ways you can do it.
Yeah, and actually, even going back to the other episode with having guests on, the fact that you can send out a podcast, or you've put it on your LinkedIn, you've put it on your Instagram, they instantly know that you have a podcast. If they have interest in it, they can watch more of it. So when it comes time to ask them to be a guest on your show, it's a lot easier for them to say yes. And I think it's just so important in this day and age to create content, whether it's podcast or something else. All we're saying is by creating a podcast, you've got limitless opportunities of creating new routes of traffic to your website, to your business, your personal branding, your social media, and you can use AI to repurpose a lot of this as well.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, it may sound a bit daunting with what we're saying with you can do this, you can do that, but actually with AI, you can do a lot of that anyway. You can have a newsletter transcribed off the back of the entire podcast show.
And I think that's a really powerful way to do it, because not everybody's going to want to listen or watch, but you're making it accessible in so many different ways. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and as much as we are big on video podcasts, we're big on it because you can also cut the reels.
Yeah.
We've said it before, it's your trailer to your movie.
Yeah.
And without trailers, no one's coming to your movie.
No.
So even if they watch the trailer and go, I'm going to the gym, I'm just going to listen to these guys, that's fine. But you've seen our trailer.
Yeah.
If we didn't have that, you're not going to listen to us at all because you won't know we exist.
How would you find it?
Like I think you mentioned before about audiographs.
One of the worst.
I see that and I skip straight past it. I'm not listening to that. I can't buy into personality off the back of that.
No. Especially because you're putting audio content really on a video platform. So like TikTok, Instagram, all those things, they're they're really like visual platforms.
Yeah.
And now you're putting just audio with a crappy visual, like it doesn't really work. It's a bit jarring.
Yeah, and everyone's in that TikTok scroll at the moment. They're not going to stop for a soundbite.
No.
Whereas if they can see two people chatting, it may stop them.
Yeah.
If they've got good lighting, good sound, it'll stop them for a few more seconds. And if they're interested in the topic, they'll maybe watch the whole 15, 20 second reel. By that time, they'll decide whether they're interested or not. They'll jump onto Spotify and listen, or they'll go onto YouTube and watch. Yeah, I think in terms of building your personal brand, I don't know of a quicker route than doing podcasts, because the opportunities that come, the doors that open because you've done a podcast. Like you said, you'll get invited onto speaking engagements. You'll do blogs, you'll do newsletters. It's absolutely limitless.
And I think that we're still in this really interesting space where previously to have a podcast was really, 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 really hard. If you were going to be on TV or on radio, it was controlled by the broadcasters. They would have to say you're worthy or you're not worthy. And we're still in this space where people think it's really, really hard to have a podcast. So just having a podcast gives you a massive boost, because people are like, you've gone through all the work to have a podcast. And that's still like, I think there's a little window of that where like it is really impressive to people that you have a podcast, and people will be intrigued even just because of that.
Yeah, and if you're providing value about something they're interested in, why would they not watch?
Yeah.
And if they scroll past because they're not interested, fine, they're not your ideal demographic anyway, so they're not your person. Yeah, and I think, social media is huge. So, and we are inundated with the amount of data we've got around us, the amount of advertising we've got around us. Having poor quality content is going to be completely missed. There's no point doing it. So having a podcast isn't easy if you're going to do it properly. I think we've got this in one of our tech ones. If you're going to go down the online route, great. You've got things like Riverside do a fantastic job. If you go down a studio route, fine. If you're going to do the DIY route, you still need to know the right equipment, the right lighting. You need to have the right stuff in place. But once you've got it in place, you are literally free to talk about whatever you are passionate about.
I think that's a really important distinction. It's not necessarily easy. It's just easier than it's ever been before. Like most people, if they really put themselves to it, could do it. Whereas before, no chance it could happen.
From a cost perspective and a permission perspective.
Yeah, and a technical expertise perspective. Like most people could not have even fathomed the idea of putting it into a distributor and doing all the stuff. But now there's a lot more friendly ways to do it. Yeah,
and we've said before, it's accessible. You can just put a phone up there and record. So there isn't any excuses there to not having a podcast. Whether you want to do it online, you want to do it in a studio setting, you want a DIY thing, you just have to do it.
And that's also why we do this, because I feel like there's a bit of a stigma that people feel like it's not accessible. And that's kind of the flip side of what I was saying, because people feel like it's hard to do, they give you some kudos for doing it. But we're also saying to you, look, actually, if you do this right stuff, it's very accessible,
It's also very impressive to your prospects, the people you're trying to land, watching in going, the fact you're putting in that much effort to create content, you keep popping up on my feeds
consistently.
It's consistent, and you've already, you're building trust by people going, you're doing this right as well. I'm sure you run your business correctly as well. And it's just another way to open opportunities, open doors where people go, I like you, I'll give you a ring. Well, you may not have had that call before. So you've just monetized on the fact you've just done a podcast by putting yourself out there.
One of the things that I've been thinking about and kind of watching in the market is the idea of premium content. So content that's behind the paywall. So I know that some platforms have started doing subscriptions where you can subscribe to certain channels, give them a small monthly fee, whatever it is. And I know that there's a whole app in America, I think it's called Fanbase, where like they've got that model of you pay to connect with your content creators and things like that.
So like exclusive content behind the scenes.
Yeah, kind of like Patreon, where like you can pay the subscription. There's some content that's available for everybody that's just free. But if you want, the behind the scenes and you want when they're recording, I can watch them live and things like that, you pay the little bit extra. And I think that's really going to grow quite a lot in the next few years.
Yeah, because I think more and more people are trying to get into podcasting, trying to find routes to market, routes to monetization. So these platforms are going to be popping up, trying to make it as easy as possible for you to monetize your podcast. Yeah. Spotify are putting a huge deal now into video podcasts, whereas before it was just audio only. YouTube have always been video, they've done music, but now they've got a whole podcast section where you can differentiate because they know it's the next big thing. It's all out there. You just need to utilize it. What I will say is I'm so impressed with Tolu today. We've had 2 podcasts. And you've not hit that mic once. Whereas previously, I think every 10 minutes you're just hitting that mic.
4 per episode, I think, was my record.
That is, yeah. That's we're recording for about 2 hours, I think, and you've not hit it once. So well done.
Don't jinx me.
On that note,
yeah.
I'm quite happy with what we've talked through. I think there's so many opportunities for people to listen to this and go, I could do this. Just get over the fact that you need to be on camera. You are the most self-critical person about yourself.
100%.
And once you get over that, because you're running a business, same as you run your social media, it's just a tool that you are going to have. Whether you want to do it this month, next year, you're going to have it. Same as you have to have social media.
Have fun with it. If you can have fun with it, everything is different. And also that comes through as well, that you're having fun, you're fun, people enjoy that. So have fun with it.
Yeah, and the first few may be a bit more daunting. Fine. Don't distribute them. Use it as practice, chuck them in the bin, do it again. Just don't have guests for those ones. But just whilst you practice, you're going to realise it's actually not that difficult to talk about your business, your passion, your expertise. And it flows naturally. As long as you've done your research and your planning, we have fun.
Yeah, it's good fun.
Good. And if we can monetize at the same time,
even better.
Let's leave that there for today for our audiences. And we're going to come back for another episode, which is going to be as fun, but not as money orientated, I believe. Good. Right. Anything you want to say to the audiences?
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Subscribe, follow, like, comment, do whatever you want, and
that stuff.
We'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Cheers.